This is Pilsen In Grey, the situation and controversy of gentrification. My name is Irvin Ibarra, and I'm here with
Teresa Magaña.
Okay. So, what is Pilsen to you?
Pilsen feels like family to me. Feels very homey.
Why is that?
I don't know. Growing up around here, just always had that feel of, like when you go to one of your favorite tia's house or your grandma's house, and you just feel comfortable. And then you go to other people's house, and you're like a little bit more like reserved. You're not like completely yourself. And I've grown up in different areas in the city, so Pilsen's always felt like the most comfortable and the most like homey, like welcoming, I guess.
Are you originally from Pilsen, or where are you from?
So my mom's Tejana, so I grew up in Texas up until I was like 9 or 10, and then we moved to Chicago where her and my dad had met. I was born here, but I was raised here for a little bit, and so we moved back when I was about 9 or 10, and pretty much my formative years and high school years and youth were between Pilsen and Little Village. And I had kids really young, but I lived in the suburbs for a little bit, but then came back to the city and then lived on the north side, the south side, and I ended up back in Pilsen again when my kids got a little bit bigger, so it always called me back.
So what do you think makes Pilsen unique? What makes Pilsen Pilsen?
I think it's just that sense of our culture and our cultura, like Latinos, that we feel just very comfortable to be completely ourselves. Like I said, I've lived in other neighborhoods, and I guess you get a different feel when you're not around a majority of your people. It's not to say that diversity isn't good or comfortable either, but it is a comfort level. So I think that's what makes it unique for me personally, is that just seeing like the convivencia of the community with each other, whether it's residential or business or schools and just people around. So.
Okay. What does it mean to you to be a Pilsen artist?
That's actually kind of something I've learned to start embracing more, because when I started doing my artwork full time and was just really delving into it, I wasn't living in Pilsen at that early stage. And when I was selling my artwork or exhibiting it in different places in the city, in the suburbs, people would always say, "Oh, you must be from Pilsen." And I was like, "No, I grew up there, but I don't live there right now." And that kept being repeated, and eventually I did move back, and I just became part of the Pilsen artist community that pretty much kind of embraces itself, and then it made sense how the distinctiveness of my artwork was able to be seen outside of the neighborhood and outside of Chicago. So it was really interesting to be in other areas and people could identify an artist's work being from a community like this. So that was very eye-opening to me at that stage. And then I felt like, okay, this is a comfortable place for me to be, to grow as an artist, to be around other generations of artists, because it's been a very creative community for a long time. So.
And talking more about art, how important do you feel are the murals that embody what Pilsen is today?
I think the importance of those murals is to keep our history alive with younger generation. Like I said, I was raised a little bit in Texas, and even though I was raised in Pilsen and Little Village, I didn't know a lot of our Mexican history, because that's not what they teach you necessarily in school. And I think it keeps these younger generation of people to be exposed to it, as well as other people visiting to question, what is that image, who is that person, why is that person being honored in that mural. And they do tell stories and history, so I think that's definitely what keeps it important.
I want to get into the Casatzlan situation regarding the covering of that very important mural back in 2017. as an artist and as a community member, how did that affect Pilsen and affect the community and affected you?
It was it's like a domino effect of feelings, I think, with individuals as artists, as a community member, and just, within living here, because, a lot of people that have been here a long time were part of the resources and the education and experiences that place had to offer. I personally didn't get to experience that, but I do recall being there a couple of times, right? And it's probably last year of it being open and walking in there and having this sense of, this is a really old place and it doesn't seem like a lot of people are putting money or resources into it to keep it alive. And it was a little sad when I visited, because I was working with somebody and they were helping them with like some tech stuff, like computer things, and it just kind of felt like that heaviness. And so when it closed down a number of years after that, unfortunately, right, to say, like, it didn't surprise me, and it was like sad, but I didn't really see or feel like a lot of people came to try to help keep that going, right? And then so when the building got bought over a number of times and finally got developed, that really kind of put the fire under everybody, that this is a reality of what happens in a neighborhood that's changing so rapidly. And if you don't support each other from the beginning or see no signs of, deterioration or like lack of resources and money and funding, then this is the reality of what's going to happen. So I think that really sparked a lot of emotion and action within different generations of people living in this community, because all of a sudden the youth were like, what's going on? We can't let this happen. And then the older generation was like, well, this has been closed for a long time and nobody said anything when it was shutting down. So like, it kind of actually brought people together to be like, this is a reality of what can happen. And now, personally, like what I've seen in the last 2 years since that's happened, there's more action, there's more attention being paid to, like, as far as like what's developing around the neighborhood, whether it's residential or commercial. So, it's very sad that happened, but it actually sparked a lot of other things to stay aware of now. And yeah, it was heartbreaking because it was beautiful artwork, and then to see what it became and what it's turned into now, it's like, it's not for everybody. It's still very, now it's a very exclusive place to try to be in. So.
Who would you say was at fault for that whole situation?
I think it could be easy for people to try to figure out what was the cause, like what was the one cause. I think, when you have a community center like that or a community space, it really involves more than just the people managing it. It takes, community members to work together. And if the management of spaces like that, if there's not good dialogue, good communication, then ultimately, you're like butting heads all the time, and you're not going to be able to keep something sustainable. Like our space here in Pilsen Outpost, like we have myself and my partner, we're the owners, but we definitely depend on the support from our community members to help keep us open, to help programming, to help find us resources if we don't have the money or the resources to do something. So it's not just like one person's fault. Like it really takes commitment and passion, I guess, from individuals to like want to keep something alive. So it would be hard for me to say like, what was the one cause. I think just like the breakdown in that communication was probably a big factor in keeping that space going.
Let's talk about 18th Street for a bit. So we know that there's been a bunch of new shops that have opened up on 18th Street. What is your opinion about these new businesses that have been springing up since the last 5 to 10 years?
It's exciting sometimes to see newer spaces open, especially when appears to be targeted for our community, and then, you know, you kind of have, it's like this anticipation of what is it really going to be? You appear to be this, but what are you really going to be? So that's my sense, you know, when I see something, you know, coming soon kind of signs. I've certainly seen like longtime residents, creative people or business, you know, entrepreneurs like open up their shops and their businesses, and that's very empowering to see that. So definitely, you know, very supportive and advocate for those things. But I've also seen big money come into this neighborhood and just pop up a restaurant or a boutique in the framework of what opens up like in Wicker Park or on the north side of the city. It follows a template, a format, and it doesn't feel authentic. And I think any space that uses the word authentic already is trying to overcompensate for what they really are. So I think when I see that and new businesses open, I'm like, why are you saying authentic if you are what you are? You don't need to say it, you know what I mean? So that's, like I said, it's exciting to see like people that work hard that want to open up their businesses, like the, you know, owner operated, you know, mom and pop shops, but it's, you know, while that's happening simultaneously, like big money is coming in to open up their, you know, established stores and shops already, you know. You know, I personally make it a point to try to follow what that business is doing, visit, see the prices, you know, experience it for myself so I can make my own decision. And also to just really pay attention how they have engaged the community from day one or prior to opening up, because some businesses will do that prior to opening up. They'll engage, you know, the surrounding community. You know, so as the space that we are, we collaborate with a lot of individuals and other businesses. And we have to question ourselves to stay conscious of who we collaborate with. And, you know, something that we're very forward and blunt about when we work with other spaces or businesses is to say like, or to be on the lookout of what their core mission is too. You know, like we're a gallery and we sell artwork and we do activities, but first and foremost, we serve the existing community and then we welcome anybody outside of that, right? So if you're a business that's like, oh, we want everybody to come in from everywhere, and it's like, and you're not really exhibiting that you're here for the community first, then that's a red flag for me, you know. So, you know, and then again, just in my personal experience, like working with newer businesses in the neighborhood where at first I thought, I'm not sure, you know, how I feel about you, but then following and seeing what they're doing as far as being socially active, it's changed my mind. And so I think like we also need to remain open-minded about giving people a chance, you know, to, I guess, prove themselves, so to speak. I know it sounds like bad, but you know, in the environment and the climate that we're in here, like, I think it's fair to say like, well, your actions will speak louder than what you're showing, you know, so.
So let's talk about the main point of this documentary. So gentrification, how has it impacted you in any way?
I think definitely I have a well-rounded experience that I can speak on for that, because when I first moved back to Pilsen, I was looking for an affordable apartment for me and my two kids. And I literally couldn't find anything under $900 for 2 bedrooms. And when I left Pilsen at a younger age, I remember the rents were anywhere from like $450 to $550. So it was like a big, like, okay, it's been a while, it's been a number of years. So it was very hard for me to find an affordable apartment for myself and my kids. And there was one particular building that I remember going to see, and it was being remodeled, but the landlady had already publicized it as $900 rent for 2 bedrooms, and it was being rehabbed. So I figured like, great, it's gonna be, everything's gonna be kind of brand new, I'll swing it, I'll figure it out. And once I went to go see it in the process of it being remodeled, And, you know, I explained, you know, who I was, and it was just going to be me and my 2 kids. And she had given me a firm, like, month that it would be available. So then she sent me an email saying, oh, it's going to take another month. And then another month went by, and it's like, oh, it's going to take another 2 months. Actually, I'm not going to be able to tell you when it's going to be ready. And it was very peculiar to me because when she showed it to me, the second floor was 3 students that were renting a $900 apartment, 2 bedrooms. And then the first floor, she said her parents were moving out and they were going to rent it, and they already had other students lined up. So I actually felt like you'd rather maybe jack up the rent a little bit more, knowing that you're going to get, you know, a group of students that will pay you what you're looking for. And it really disheartened me because I'm like, here I am, like a resident wanting to, you know, have a family here, and it's not accessible to me. You'd rather choose, you know, to rent to students. So I was like, fine, whatever. So I found a smaller apartment. I lived there for about 1.5 years, and then it took me another 6 months to find the place where I'm at now. And that was a big eye-opener too, because it took me 6 months to literally find another space. Way back when, you could get an apartment from 1 month to the next because everybody's moving, you know, around the same time, so there's always something available. And it just wasn't accessible at all. So on the residential side, like, I've experienced that, how the neighborhoods changed, and that was happening. Having a business, when we were looking for our retail space, anything on 18th Street 4 years ago was between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. And being a brand new business, like, we couldn't afford that. So we negotiated something with, you know, a little bit more on the residential side, not necessarily on 18th Street. And we were there for a number of years. And when this space became available, you know, we got a good rate for it, but we did our research just to see what the rents were going for on 18th Street 4 years later. You won't find anything less than like $2,000. It's probably up more within the last year, but that was a reality of, like, within a matter of 4 years, how much just retail space had just skyrocketed, you know. So that's been a big eye-opener for me. And I guess the other thing is that I think some of us that were born and raised here were conflicted with how long we stay when we leave and when we come back. So I grew up, like I said, between Pilsen and Little Village, and we knew what streets to stay away from. We knew which pockets to be careful with, and we always had that in the back of our mind. So my oldest is, you know, I have a son and a daughter, and I always had that in my mind, like, where could we live where I don't have to worry about my son walking down the street? And so when he was younger, I didn't feel like I could live in Pilsen at the time. Once he got older and I saw the neighborhood change and it felt safer, so to speak, I actually felt more comfortable to be like, okay, he's in high school now. I think he's okay with, like, walking to the train and going on the bus, and I don't have to worry about him being, you know, checked as he's walking down the street. And so I think some of us residents, like, are conflicted with that the reality is, like, gentrification brings that sense of safety, you know, that, like, there's more police, there's more, you know, maybe the gangbangers aren't as out there as they were, you know, before. And when you have kids, you think about that, you know, and people that don't have kids, they might have a different perspective on it. So yeah, that's, you know, reality for me on how the gentrification has affected, like, how I feel being here, you know.
So 10,300 people who were long-term Latino Pilsen residences have now left Pilsen. What factors do you think have contributed to that number?
I mean, there's a range there. I feel like my generation that have been born and raised here, like, there's that sense of wanting to do better, and you go to college, you get a better job, you get more money, so you leave the neighborhood. You want something better, you want a house, you want to live in a nicer area. I think that could be a factor. I think also, obviously, the reality of the cost of living here, the pricing of whether it's rents or the taxes going up for people that actually own their homes, is a reality, and people have to decide, like, you know, can I still sustain myself here? But as much as I think that I know that there's been a exodus, right, of Latinos leaving, there's actually now like this generation of Latinos coming back also. But it's not then about culture or where you're from. It's like money talks in Pilsen now. It's not really like what color you are, you know, that you were born and raised here, or you're Mexican or not Mexican. It's like, if you have the money to be here, like we have, it's so diverse here, but it really is now about like money, you know.
This is the final thought section. So why are you an artist? What motivates you to create art?
Ooh. You would think that'd be an easy answer. Motivates me to make art. I started this much later in life than other artists that I know that have been doing it since they were really young. For me personally, it's just been very liberating to work and hustle in doing something that brings me happiness and joy. Because I used to work in corporate for a lot of years, and when you're exposed to that environment, and then you're exposed to like a very humble, modest way of living and just being creative and like truly being yourself, it's super liberating. And you're like, I don't want to go back to, you know, the regular 9-to-5 or corporate world. And that's been my experience. So my passion and my motivation to keep doing it is that I just want to enjoy living the rest of my life with not having a box around me, you know. So.
And what inspires you to produce the artwork that you do?
So my artwork that I produce is themed and has a heavy influence with Dia de los Muertos and just kind of folk art style designs, and I feel like that's my way of staying connected to my roots and staying connected to my culture, is being, you know, Chicano, Mexican American, whatever you want to call it. You know, you're born and raised here, so you have this American experience, but you have parents that are from Mexico. It's the artwork that I create has helped me to just stay connected to it, so I don't lose it. You know, my kids are second generation here, so them being able to be exposed to Latino art, I think then is another extension of them staying connected too. Because eventually you would hope that they don't lose that connection, or that people don't lose where their roots and their culture is. So.
Final question. Are you hopeful for the future of Pilsen?
I'm an optimistic. I'm always hopeful. I think there's a lot of loud enough actions, activities, just personal investment from a lot of people that live here that keep it hopeful. Now, is that realistic? You know, again, I go back to that, you know, about money, you know, and I think as Latinos, we need to really be mindful of how we spend our money, where we spend it, and that could be an impact. And just doing things like this and talking about it and making it a normal thing to talk about, and not make it, you know, people come in here and they're like, they don't like saying the word gentrification. It feels like, you know, dirty to them, or it feels like they're talking about a bad thing, and it's like, no, it's a very normal word to use, you know. So I stay hopeful in the sense that if we keep talking about it and keep making people really aware of what the reality is of it, then people will be mindful of how they make their choices, you know, how they spend their money, what they're buying, if they're renting, if they're buying property, and extending that to the community. Like, you know, if you own a building, are you gonna jack up the rent, or are you gonna make it sustainable, you know? And so that keeps me hopeful that people will learn, and, you know, try to shift it, you know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.